Hey folks, David Wills here with TED-IELTS.com, and today I'm going to be showing you how to write an excellent essay for IELTS Writing Task 2. We're going to be focusing on coherence and cohesion, which is one of the 4 areas in which all IELTS writing candidates are marked. This is maybe one of the most misunderstood parts of the exam. How do you write an essay that has great coherence and cohesion? Well, we're going to find out today. We're going to be focusing on how to structure your essay and how to create a natural flow from one idea to the next. So here is the question we'll be looking at today. As you can see, this question is about the environment, which is a very common IELTS topic, and it says that you must discuss both views. I have underlined some important parts of this question. Some people say that the main environmental problem of our time is the loss of a particular species of plants and animals. Others say that there are more important environmental problems. So to me, the most important things from the first sentence are the main environmental problem. So we're talking about what is the biggest problem. Then essentially, is it losing particular species of plants and animals, or is there something else, something bigger? An interesting part is when it says particular species, you wonder, are they looking for any specific ones? And I suppose you should give an example, like whales, tigers, elephants, things like that. When it says other more important environmental problems, now you have to think of these because there's no example given for you. Very important to look at the next line, discuss both of these views and give your own opinion. So what do you need to do then? Well, you need to discuss 2 things. You can't just discuss one of them. Number 1, discuss the loss of the species of plants or species of animals. And number 2, you have to bring up at least another 1 or so environmental issues. Then you have to give your own opinion. So you must do both those things, or those 3 things if you're to break them down like that. Today though, we're talking about coherence and cohesion. So we're talking about how to go from one idea to the next and the next. And to be honest, I think that the logical way of approaching this is to follow the order of the question. We can go from discussing the loss of species to environmental problems and then give our own opinion. We're going to do this in a 4-paragraph structure, which will include an introduction, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and then a conclusion. I'm going to link down below to another video that I've made which asks about whether you should write 4 or 5 paragraphs, because that is a common question. But I say 9 out of 10 times you just write 4 paragraphs. Once you've analyzed the question, before you decide how you're going to structure it, you need to plan your essay out, and that begins with generating ideas. So if we're looking at those 2 things we must do, talk about the loss of species and describe other environmental problems, we should then think about these 2 categories. Now, a better word than loss of species is extinction of species. So that's the first category, and then the other problems you can see on the right. Now, for me, I'm going to first have at least a sentence saying why are species going extinct. Then I'm going to talk about what the problem is, and then I'm going to talk about the result. You can see already I'm starting to structure my first body paragraph. So first I'm going to talk about poaching and deforestation. Deforestation means to cut down trees. Then for what the problem is, well, it's not that tigers will go extinct, for example, or elephants. It's that if you lose one species, then you lose many species. This is what we call biodiversity. Diverse meaning many of, bio meaning nature. So biodiversity means there are many species, or the range of species. Finally, I would talk about the result of the extinction of these species would be the collapse of certain ecosystems. So that would be my first paragraph, or my first body paragraph. The second one, I think, would be devoted to the other problems. And I would start with what is the problem? Well, it's not good to talk about too many things, so I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to say that's climate change. Then I'm going to say, well, why do we have climate change? Again, there's so many things you could talk about. Air pollution from factories, or farming, or cars, or burning trash. But I'm going to talk about, again, or at least mention, deforestation and the loss of coral reefs. And then finally, I will say that the result is the extinction of everything, including humans. Now this is pretty good, but actually I'm going to try and make mine a little more complicated. So the question asked us to describe both positions, the loss of animals and the other environmental problems. But it said which is worse, which is the biggest problem. And to me, I don't think you can choose one or the other. So my key idea, my main point then, is that both of these are essentially the same. I'm not going to say that the extinction of one species is worse than climate change, because it's not. But I don't think that you can have one without the other. If we kill all the sharks, then all the fish will die, and the coral will die, and the sea will die, and everyone and everything will be dead. So this would cause climate change, it would cause destruction of our world. And I think the reverse is true. If the climate's changed, then all the animals die, and the plants die as well. So I'm going to try and incorporate this idea then that both of these arguments are very much linked, and that we cannot just choose one over the other. So then I'm going to show you now how to structure your essay, starting with the introduction. Now my introductions usually have 2 or 3 sentences, sometimes 4 if they're short sentences or a complex idea. And I'm going to start off by paraphrasing the question and stating both ideas. So to paraphrase means to say something in a new way, even though it's the same idea. And I think it's important to state both positions. Next, for the second sentence, I will outline my essay. So I'll say something like, this essay will, or in this essay I will. I generally try to avoid saying I in these. And I will state my view, which is that both problems are actually the same, that they're linked. You'll remember that from the previous slide. So this is my introduction here. It is obvious that the planet is in great danger, but people disagree over whether the main problem is the loss of certain species or other issues such as climate change. This essay will discuss both views and conclude that they are both interrelated and that there is no one problem that is the worst. For my next paragraph, I'm going to follow the same structure I outlined before, but let's look at it sentence by sentence. First, I'll give a general sentence about the topic. You usually want to start these paragraphs very general, no specific details. Then I'm going to get more specific. I'll explain why plants and animals are going extinct. Then I'll say why that is a problem. And then I will conclude by making the overall point clear. That would look like this. Around the world, species of animals and plants are dying at a shocking rate. Forests are being cut down to make way for giant cattle farms, while endangered animals are being poached so that their body parts can be sent to China to make fake medicines. This is a devastating trend, not just because these animals don't deserve to die, but because biodiversity is tremendously important to the planet. When sharks are killed, for example, it is not just the sharks that die. The whole underwater ecosystem faces collapse, which can be catastrophic for the world. You can see there in the final sentence, when I say the whole underwater ecosystem faces collapse, I'm kind of bringing together all my previous sentences but I'm also tying in the main idea, which is that the loss of one species is not just one species, and that therefore everything that we're talking about here adds up to the same, which is the destruction of our world. Paragraph 3 is going to be longer and a little more complicated. We'll start with a transition sentence. That means it refers back to the previous paragraph and introduces this one. Then we'll have the topic sentence, which is the main idea of this paragraph, which you'll remember is all about climate change, the other environmental problem. I will explain climate change with causes and effects. I'm going to do this in just one sentence because obviously this is a short essay. I'll say why this is so bad. I will then relate this back to the previous paragraph. So this is where my structure gets a little complicated. Those first 4 sentences are your typical paragraph, but because I need to present my view, which is that both the extinction of animals and climate change are the same thing, I need to have 2 sentences at the end of this paragraph. So I'm going to relate these points to the previous paragraph and then explain why both animal extinction and climate change are interrelated. As you can see, this paragraph is a little longer, but it's not very long. My overall essay is going to be only about, I think, 280 or 290 words, which is perfect for IELTS. Other problems exist aside from just the loss of species. Major environmental issues today include climate change. This is caused by many factors such as air pollution and the loss of forests and coral reefs, and it has massive potential ramifications such as the sea level rises and desertification. Ultimately, this could lead to the extinction of humanity and the destruction of our world. However, to say that it is worse than the extinction of certain species overlooks the fact that they are related. When we kill certain plants and animals, we are contributing to climate change indirectly, and all of these environmental tragedies bring the world closer to complete destruction. Finally, our conclusion is just going to have one sentence that will paraphrase the main idea like this. In conclusion, there are many ways in which humans are wreaking havoc on the planet, but it is hard to say that one is worse than another because they all add up to the same result. You can see here I have not gone back and repeated anything from my essay. It's sometimes good to go back and mention your first point and your second point. Just very generally, don't repeat the exact words, but mention them briefly. But here, I didn't think that was necessary. To be honest, there were too many complex points from paragraph 1 and 2. So I've just restated my overall idea in new words. When the IELTS examiner is marking your essay, he or she will look at this. This is a list of things they need to consider for coherence and cohesion. At the top we have band 9 and down below we have band 6. I'm not going to explain anything below band 6 because I don't think that will be helpful for most of my viewers. So to get band 6, then you're going to need to arrange your information. You're going to be able to use basic cohesive devices, and you're going to reference somewhat. But there's going to be a lot of mistakes. Go to band 7, we can do all of this, but better. We're going to be logically organizing information. We're going to be making a progression, and we're going to use different kinds of cohesive devices, but maybe too much or too little of them. For band 8, we need to again sequence logically. You're going to be able to use most aspects of cohesion well. That means joining your sentences together, and your paragraphs will be fine. And for band 9, that's what this essay is, then it's going to be using cohesion in such a way as it attracts no tension. That basically means perfectly, like a native speaker. You can really learn this by reading a lot, and I don't mean just reading IELTS essays, I mean reading so many different kinds of things to get an idea for how it's done. And you need to be able to paragraph skillfully, which is what I've tried to tell you in this video. So the 4 things I think you need to be familiar with from this list are paragraphing, so how to have an introduction, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and so on. You need organizing, so putting your ideas together logically and also sequencing them, so first, second, third. Cohesive devices, we didn't really look at that today, but I'll show you in a moment. And then referencing. Referencing is when we use things like this, those, these. Words that refer back to a previous idea or a word. And to be honest, referencing is something you really need to be able to do in order to score a band 6 or higher. So here is my essay altogether. You've already seen the different paragraphs so far. This would definitely be a band 9. The grammar is perfect, the vocabulary is very high level, the answer is complete and full, and for coherence and cohesion it really comes together nicely. But I wanted to show you this all together to see one important thing. How many cohesive devices do I have? Well, you can see I've underlined them here. But, and, while, for example, ultimately. These are different kinds of linking or transition phrases. You can also include words like when and so forth. So there are ones there, but there aren't too many, is my main point. You have a problem with many students who learn that cohesive devices are important, and so they try to write as many as possible. They say, on the one hand, on the other hand, firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally, next. If you write too many of these, your writing doesn't sound natural. Maybe the grammar is perfect, but if it doesn't sound natural, you have a big problem. When you look at my writing, you can see there aren't many cohesive devices. That's partly because my ideas flow very logically from one to the next. Look at paragraph 3. At the beginning, other problems exist aside from the loss of species. So this sentence already connects paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, but there are no cohesive devices in here. I don't say, therefore, on the other hand, whereas, meanwhile. I just use my ideas to link one paragraph to the next. This is why it's so important to plan your essay before you begin. If you plan out your ideas, they will go logically from one to the next, and you don't need to use so many cohesive devices. Right, that's all for today. I hope that this video has been helpful for you. If it has, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And maybe you can share with your friends on Facebook. I'll be back soon for another IELTS video, so I'll see you next time.